Welcome back to the devlog of my platformer game, where you descend into the earth facing increasingly difficult challenges. Last time, I finished the second third of the asbestos mine, making great use of flame bubbles and nail guns. This time, I was miraculously able to finish the layout of the entire final third, and start work on a proper set of player sprites. I say miraculously because, although the section isn't terribly long, I had to do a lot of work to make sure it turned out well. For some context, at the same time I've been making the level layout, I've also been trying to determine the best way to organize the levels. The idea so far is that every level is made up of 3 sections in a boss fight, separated by checkpoints. Each section is made up of 3 subsections, taking around a minute each to complete. All put together, including some extra time for the boss fight, a whole level should take around 10 minutes. I also want the levels to be constantly engaging, so each subsection should introduce a new idea that it develops on. This could be a new hazard, level element, or just a new way of using previous elements. In the case of the new subsections, these are the Spear Knight and Drill, crushing ceilings, and miners near cliffs. Thinking about my game this way means that I don't have to waste as much effort determining how to extend the level, and whether I can use previous elements or should make new ones. In some ways, I now have to put more effort into implementing those new ideas, but that's what's necessary to achieve the goals of this game. So now let's take a look at what's going on in these subsections. In the first subsection, I added a Spear Knight. Whenever you get close, it attacks, so you have to attack quickly and move away before you take damage. I also added a drill that moves down when you move under it. Both obstacles are used together to make the subsection increasingly difficult. At first, you encounter both in isolation, but then you have to jump up ledges and traverse under smaller gaps. Then you go into an area where you can't jump to avoid attacks, followed by an area where you have to maneuver around the asbestos on the ground while dodging the drills on the ceiling and the Spear Knight on a different platform. Finally, you have to jump onto a lower platform, immediately dodging drills while jumping over pits, and killing a Spear Knight on the other end of some barbed wire. There's also a descending area leading into the next subsection. While making this area, I actually didn't run into any significant problems. The pieces just kind of fell into place and worked well, so I had some extra time to add more unique visuals. I wanted to give the impression that this area is slightly more inhabited, so I added chairs, papers, and of course large wooden beams. I'm worried that it might look too similar to other parts of the level, but I couldn't tell just how much it stands out until I finish more of the visuals. Moving on to the second subsection, you're immediately trapped, until you pull a lever and see that it blows up this specific type of tile. This gives you the opportunity to learn this section's mechanics in a safe environment. You can then choose to go either left or right. Whichever path you choose, you'll enter a long hallway with many obstacles. At the end of the hallway is a lever that begins to destroy the ceiling. You now have to escape before being crushed and killed by the falling blocks. When you reach the safe area, you'll see that pulling the lever turns the corresponding red light green. Turning both lights green would remove some dangerous asbestos below, but I haven't actually implemented it yet. To make this section work, I had to design it in a certain way. Because there's such a short time window to make it out, I avoided adding any enemies which are too unpredictable to make the timing consistent. I also felt the falling ceiling was too punishing, since it instantly kills you, so I had the ceiling fall a bit slower whenever you take damage, making it possible to take one hit and still make it out alive. I think this subsection turned out very well, since the falling ceiling is a fun mechanic, and it's also nice to provide a bit of choice in the path you take. You can also see I used a different visual style for this area. I used rusted metal to give the impression that this is a very mechanical area, but so far I feel like something is missing. The tile set is kind of bland and there aren't enough background details. It's definitely something I'll work on more as I finish up this level. Once you descend further, you enter the final subsection. You jump onto these really thin platforms and have pickaxes thrown at you by a miner. After, you avoid a couple of bats and have to avoid the pickaxes of 2 miners at the same time. This is my favorite part of the section because it's incredibly difficult, but there is definitely a pattern you can recognize and avoid. Lastly, you have to avoid a rock lump and descend down a series of platforms under a number of drills. Admittedly, this subsection doesn't have as clear of a theme as previous ones do, because adding any more challenges dodging pickaxes would seem redundant. So I added a couple of challenges I was already thinking of, and added a drill section that mostly exists to be a dramatic end to the level, before the boss encounter. This subsection also doesn't have particularly unique visuals, but I'd like to make it look more dark and aged like would be expected of the deepest point in the level. Now that I've finished the general layout of the level, I might go back and change previous sections to follow a more similar format to the final one. I'll also try to finalize some of the visuals, and hopefully move on to a new level with a plan that will allow me to finish the game before the end of the year. But before I get ahead of myself, there's still some other smaller changes I made since the last devlog. Of course you're aware that the player graphics have been improved, but you might have also noticed that the lanterns throughout the level are slightly more orange rather than pure white. I also made the camera move more smoothly so that the movement is less jarring. All of these changes were suggested to me, and I think they're great ideas. So if you guys have any more suggestions, I'd love to hear them because they're very helpful. With that said, if you want to keep up with future updates, please consider subscribing. Thank you. Bye.